Mic check 1 2 1 2. Make sure that we can get some feedback here. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Can anybody in the chat hear me? Digital Underground Sales and Marketing. What's going on, bro? Favor, yo. Mega Montana. What's going on? Peace to you. Raining Woman. Peace and blessings to you as always. Information Man. You know how we do over here. What's going on, bro? Hey, yo. Yo. What's going on, fam? Yeah, I apologize for the wait, man. I had to get the docket together. I have one more piece that I need to add to it, so. But definitely hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. This is episode 251. Oh, thanks, Favor. Thanks, man. We appreciate that that sort of feedback. Yeah, we try to bring that sort of content, to the manosphere. The manosphere is in dire need of quality content, and as you can see, man, it's not really cracking like that out there. Despite what the numbers say, despite what the super chats and Patreons and streaming labs and all the other avenues of revenue, man, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it. We're not seeing it. We don't believe them. So not hating on anybody, just we call it how we see it. You got thousands of people in the chat room, but the content is trash. So I'm not believing the numbers, man. SoundScan can say what they want, man. A whack album is a whack album. Too many content creators and not enough critics, man. People giving out awards and stuff like that, for whack content. So not something I'm feeling, not something that we're feeling as a platform. And that's why we exist. That's why we exist, man. We was tired of all of the effery that was going on, so we decided we're gonna have to create our own content and focus on what we do best, and that's how we got to where we are today. We trust the formula, trust the process, and it works. All right, we'll get started in over 30 seconds. Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed that I had to end the live stream earlier than I anticipated. I really thought we were gonna go up to about 11 o'clock on that, man, but everything happens for a reason. So All right, we're gonna get started, man. If anybody from the chat wants to get on the panel, you're welcome to get on the panel as well, provided that you stick to the topic. Just as a FYI, I'm still doing IT mentorship. I've been in contact with about 2 dozen or so people in the last few days. So yeah, I'm still doing it. So if you want to get into IT, um, I can coach you there, as well as if you move from one IT position to another, I can coach you there as well. So all right, so first item on the docket is from CNBC.com. Facebook will never break through with Oculus, says one of the VR company's co-founders. Expand this out. 5 years after its $2 billion purchase of Oculus, Facebook is still pushing forward in its efforts to bring virtual reality to a mainstream audience. But one of the company's six co-founders now doubts Oculus will ever break through. Jack McCauley told CNBC he doesn't think there's a real market for VR gaming. With Facebook positioning its Oculus devices primarily as gaming machines, McCauley doesn't believe there's much of a market for the device. If we're going to sell, we would have sold, McCauley said in a phone interview on Wednesday. McCauley, who left Oculus in November 2015, said sales of the devices he worked on were modest. The original DK1, released in 2013, sold 70,000 units, while the follow-up DK2 from 2014 sold 150,000, he recalled. Sales have grown with newer devices, but Oculus has yet to have a hit. The $199 Oculus Go has sold a little more than 2 million units since its release in May 2018, according to the estimates provided by the market research firm SuperData, a Nielsen company. The Oculus Quest, which was released this May, has sold nearly 1.1 million units, while the Oculus Rift has sold 547,000 units since the start of 2018, according to SuperData. For comparison, Sony sold 17.8 million PlayStation 4 units during its 2018 fiscal year, while Nintendo sold nearly 17 million Switch units during its 2018 fiscal year. Microsoft doesn't break out Xbox One unit sales. In May, Facebook released two headsets, the untethered $399 Oculus Quest and the computer-powered $399 Oculus Rift S. The tech company is also looking to buy up game studios and secure exclusive deals to beef up Oculus's game library, according to a report this week by The Information. But McCauley, who worked on two developer versions of the Oculus and stayed through Facebook's acquisition of the company in March 2014, said there's a lot of fundamental issues that remain unsolved with VR gaming. Primarily, people still get nauseated when they put on a VR headset, McCauley said. And many people prefer to play video games alongside with their friends on a 2D display, McCauley added. Video games have not evolved into a 3D experience for a number of reasons, he said. I don't know what kind of application it would be for VR that would keep players plugged in for 6 hours like they do with game consoles. McCauley speaks as a long-time veteran of the video game industry. He worked on Guitar Hero for Activision, the Xbox 360 for Microsoft, and at Electronic Arts before co-founding Oculus. You put it on, and there's a lot of wow to it, but then what do you do with it? McCauley said. Even where I was, even even when I was there, I thought people weren't going to wear a headset and walk around with it in public. Facebook has enough money to keep investing in Oculus as it has for the past 5 years, but McCauley thinks that would be throwing good money after bad. I may be wrong, but I've been doing this a long time. He said, I've already done a lot of what people do mistake wise. You have your gut, and it tells you if you're right or wrong. And in this case, I think I'm right. Since leaving in 2015, Macaulay has enjoyed semi-retired life. He's an innovator in residence at Berkeley's Jacob Institute of Design Innovation, and he continues to build all sorts of devices, such as gun capable of shooting down drones at his own research and development facility. Facebook declined to comment. So this is a very interesting article because Facebook has been in the news as of recent for its Libra coin, and because it has been in the news, people don't look at the other failures that Facebook has made, the blunders that Facebook has made. Whether it's Oculus Rift or it has been losing data, PII and things of that nature, Cambridge Analytica scandal, censorship on Facebook. Facebook has made many blunders outside of the tech itself, the innovation portion of the tech itself. My position has been that for VR, you would need. This is more geared towards movies than games. It has to be more about dynamic content, not so much as gaming. Gaming is only one aspect. If you can sit in a chair and you can, keep the headset on, then fine. A chair that's maneuverable will be actually interesting with it. And being how much the headset costs, it's very expensive for what you're getting out of it. They would have to pair it with something just as powerful or something to drive the power itself. Maybe if there was some form of TV that it connected to, or some form of some other device that would actually make it perfect. When you start talking about like real estate, for example, um, if I'm a real estate company, I'm a real estate agent, and I want to show somebody the inside of a house without actually bringing anybody into the inside of the house from across the country. You can actually do that with the VR headset, but they seem to be focused on just gaming. The gaming aspect is one aspect that can drive the as an application that can actually drive it, but it's not the primary. It should not be the primary driver of the HR headset, the VR headset. Sorry. Hey, there's 30 people watching this and only 21 likes. Please hit the like button if you're not going to participate in the chat. It's greatly appreciated. So yeah, Facebook, throwing $2 billion at it. This is kind of the reason why people are skeptic about what Facebook does financially. Um, there's a lot of other things they could have done with $2 billion, and I don't think that the VR headset was probably the best way to uh, spend that kind of money. But that goes to show you how bad how bad the outlook is on startups. Oculus. You have a co-founder from the startup itself saying this is never going to work. Well, why did you co-find it in the first place? I find that to be interesting. But that's what goes on in the tech industry. We'll move on to the next article. Hey, what's going on, Kareem Austin? Michael Holt, what's going on? All right, this one is from darkreading.com. Toyota's car hacking tool now available. Toyota officially ha- Toyota officially has begun offering a commercial version of its new portable automotive security testbed Pasta, open source testing platform for researchers and nascent car hacking experts. The car maker rocked the cybersecurity industry with the introduction of Pasta last December at Black Hat Europe in London, where Toyota's uh, Toyoshi Toyoma, a member of Toyota's Info Technology Center, along with his Toyota colleague Takuya Yoshida, demonstrated the tool, which sits in an 8-kilogram portable stainless steel briefcase. Automakers traditionally had dismissed cybersecurity research that exposed security holes in automated and network features in car models. So Toyota's homegrown tool represented a major shift in the auto industry. The Pasta hardware and software tool product sells for $28,300, including the steel briefcase. So the commercial version isn't necessarily geared for the newbie hobbyist. Toyota earlier this year placed Pasta open source specification on GitHub, including those on the platform itself. CAN, controller area network, ID maps, ECU, engine control unit, program codes, and ECU circuit diagrams for vehicle testing. Pasta allows researchers to study how a car's engine control units, ECUs, operate, as well as the CAN protocol used for communicating among elements of the vehicle and to test vulnerabilities and exploits. It's not, however, meant to uh, live. Uh, um, it's not meant for live moving vehicle hacking and testing, such as that pioneered by researchers Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek. The tool includes 4 ECUs as well as LED panels that are controllable by the researcher to run tests on of the car system operation or simulate attacks such as injection malicious uh, CAN messages. It also contains OBD2 and RS-232C ports, as well as a port for debugging or binary hacking. The Toyota developers also envision Pasta being employed for research and development purposes on real vehicles. A car maker should test run the impact of a third party feature on the vehicle's security, for example. So, this has been long discussed. I believe some years ago, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, there were some hackers at Black Hat who were able to hijack the features on a Jeep Wrangler, or it might have been a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Either way, it was a Chrysler-based vehicle, and they were able to uh, disable the locks or lock up the brakes, something to that effect. Basically um, they basically tamper with the car's mechanisms that allow it to accelerate and decelerate, and as well as unlock and unlock, since they all since they all go to um, the main brain of the vehicle itself. So what they're starting to see now every year is that cars are being hacked. Um, One of the cheapest hacks that you would have seen maybe 10 years or so ago is the car alarm itself being disabled remotely. Someone showing up with a dummy key. A dummy key is is a key that hasn't been programmed to the vehicle yet, even though it does not belong to the vehicle. So they take this dummy key and they can actually sync the key to the car and unlock the vehicle and actually start it up and drive away with it. So those were some of the first hacks that was coming out from a at least from a cybersecurity standpoint, or I should say a vulnerability security standpoint, more of a risk management thing. right? Not so much as cyber because it has nothing to do with internet-based communications. But what I'm saying here is we're moving into that direction where people's cars can be hacked. Tesla, many of the other electric vehicle manufacturers who have cars on the road, those cars are vulnerable to spoof attacks. And a spoof attack to a autonomous vehicle would be repainting the lines on the road, or even covering up some of the lines where the car sensors can't pick up the lines on the road, and next thing you know that the car swerves and goes in the opposite direction because it's focusing on the physically painted lines in the road. That becomes a problem. You're starting to see people in these Teslas fall asleep while driving while they put the car in autonomous mode, which I find to be very interesting. And all it takes is somebody to take some spray paint the ground in the middle of a highway and disrupt, the car's ability to guide itself, the guidance sensors on it. This is a big problem, um, in my opinion. In my opinion, so it's good that Toyota's putting out this type of equipment so that people can actually do the testing. This is more like black box text. No, I shouldn't say black box, but it's a form of black box and white box testing. Is what we call in cybersecurity. So, all right, we got 33 people watching and only 30 likes. Please hit the like button if you're not going to participate in the chat. Black Fire, what's going on? All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this next one is from CNBC.com. BMW and Daimler to team up and push towards self-driving vehicles. Let me expand this out. BMW and Mercedes manufacturer Daimler announced a new partnership on Thursday to develop autonomous driving. Some 1,200 technicians from the two German auto giants will team up in a bid to develop self-driving technology. The engineers will work towards driver assistance systems, automated driving on highways, as well as parking. The firms say the technology will be specified to what industry insiders call SAE Level 4. Further, talks are planned to extend the cooperation to higher levels of automation in urban areas and city centers, BMW said in a joint statement. SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, levels determine the automation capabilities of vehicles, ranking from 0 to 5. Level 4 vehicles can intervene if things go wrong or if there is a system failure. Excuse me. The car can perform all functions itself, although a manual override is available to a driver. Daimler and BMW said they are targeting 2024 as a key date for installing technology in cars available to the general public. The automaker said the cooperation is non-exclusive and partner manufacturers and technology firms will take part in the work. They added that the results won't be kept secret and the other firms can see the conclusions under license. On Tuesday, the two German companies joined with 9 other firms to publish a white paper on driverless technology entitled Safety First for Automated Driving. The reports aim to draft worldwide industry standards for tackling the risk of self-driving cars and trucks. Authors and experts from the firms involved say they aim to present the paper's principles and findings at auto industry technology conferences over the next few months. BMW said the main goal of the paper is to create a situation where an autonomously driven vehicle is proven to be safer than one involving full human control. Other participants in the document include Audi, Baidu, Continental, Fiat, Chrysler, Hair Technologies, Infineon, Intel, Volkswagen, and Aptiv. So, um, this is actually a positive, but it was unexpected. These are two rivals, BMW and Daimler, two European car companies, two German car companies, um, who are very powerful in their own right in the industry. When you have two of the mega European car companies getting together and deciding the future of autonomous vehicle safety and other features, this becomes the writing is on the wall. They're talking 2024, so you're talking just about 4 years from now, and they're talking about publishing papers in the next quarter, right? So anywhere between September to November, you should start seeing paperwork go out on this type of stuff. This is where we are right now. You know, a lot of people are still thinking, um, and when I say a lot of people, I'm saying black people. Black people are still thinking that this can't happen. This could never happen. Nobody would ever buy an autonomous vehicle. We would never have self-driving cars. In reality, it's happening in your face. And the question here is, what side of the table are you going to be on? Are you going to be a consumer, or are you going to be involved in the design phase, in the development of this sort of industry? This is a part of the um, fourth industrialized economy. So that's where we are right now. There's several companies that have partnered with them, but those are startups. Um, we need to have more people involved in those startups as well. All right, let me get to the next item on the docket. All right, so next item on the docket is from RevZilla. Eric Buell's fuel electric bicycle project over 1,100% funded on Indiegogo. So let me expand my screen out for a second. Fuel is the product of a chance meeting between Eric Buell and Frederic Vasseur and Francois Xavier Turney, three innovators determined to create an electric urban mobility solution for cities. You've probably only heard of Mr. Buell, as you can guess by the company's name. They are aware. If you haven't, Eric Buell created his own brand of American motorcycles that combine Harley power plants with his radical ideas about what motorcycles should be. But eventually joined Harley, things didn't last. Buell eventually joined Harley, things didn't last. And Buell struck out on his own again, only to eventually close up shop and move on. The story is far from complex. It's far more complex than that, but that's an overview if you needed one. Now he's working with Fuel to build electric two wheelers. Vasseur specializes in motorsports and EV development. Turney is actually Fuel CEO. His background is in strategy, management, and investing, and other disciplines you better have around for your EV startup. This is a picture of the bike. Move on. I can't I can't speak for Vasseur or Tenery, but Eric Buell doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who can stop dreaming up new bikes. Enter Fuel, their electric mobility company that burst onto the scene this year. Fuel's first product, Fluid Electric Bicycle, launched on Indiegogo to crowdfund the first units, and things seem to be going pretty well. Fuel asked for $75,000 and raised $849,000 at the time of writing. As of 4 days ago, Fuel locked the order and paid for all parts. Production is already underway. So this is a video of the bike. I guess it's a commercial. So it has a range of up to 200 kilometers. That's pretty amazing. This is probably going to be the future of urban mobility. You know, people will buy less cars and probably have more bikes, especially in places like Africa and Latin America. Let me read the last paragraph here. The bike comes in two trim levels: Fluid One, 250 watts or 500 watts US, and the Fluid 1S, 500 watts as well. Three motors are available. They are limited to 15.5 miles per hour in the EU and 20 miles per hour and 28 miles per hour in the US. For any e-vehicle, range is a number everyone will be asking about. The Fluid is rated for up to 125 miles, 200 kilometers of pedal assistance. This is actually really good. Just as a an idea of 125 miles, 125 miles will be anywhere between Boston to like maybe Hartford, Connecticut at best. Probably closer to New York. Boston to Providence is 60 miles, and anything beyond that is another. Yeah, that's about 100. It's about 120 miles from Boston to Hartford. So, of course, the Fluid must deal with batteries like any other bike. Fuel's design can be run with two batteries, which lock into the aluminum frame with a key. When just when just using one battery, the spare slot can be turned into lockable storage with an accessory cover, $69 plus shipping. That's the kind of cleverness I'd hope to see on the Buell project. A display on the handlebar shows battery level, pedal assistance level, and speed. Batteries can be charged to 80% in 2.5 hours or to full charge in 5 hours. The batteries in range come with a weight penalty. The Fluid weighs in at 69 pounds. That's not exactly slim for an electric bicycle. However, the range figures given are plenty for most commuters, and the charge time is reasonably well. Fuel claims the torque sensors built into the bike allow for more precise response from the motor when the rider pedals, which translate into a smoother acceleration and intuitive pedaling assistance. Power is sent to the rear wheel via a carbon belt. No chains here. And the 8 gears are enclosed in the hub. Fuel prices fuels prices are fairly competitive for the e-bike space. The Fluid 1S starts at $2,599 one battery with options ranging all the way up to top level Fluid 1S Prime, which is $3,499. Add 99 to $299 for shipping, depending on where you're sending your bike. Shipping is expected to begin in August, so next month. Fuel also has announced the Flow electric motorcycle, which is intended to be the equivalent to a small sport bike. Interesting. Yeah, this is pretty interesting. This is very interesting because this is the equivalent of a this is probably the equivalent of a an electric scooter. Well, not electric scooter, a gas scooter. This would be the equivalent of a gas scooter, probably a 125 cc scooter. Let's look at some of these pictures real quick. Yeah, I don't see too much wrong with this. Although it's heavy, I don't think there's any other way to actually build the bike without it having like this, without having some form of weight to it. Yeah, Joe Black. I think that's eventually going to happen. Um, not Gabe. Joe Black says it could replace gas scooter and moped. I think we're already at that stage. I think we're already at that stage. Because typically you would never bring your gas scooter in your apartment building, right? In any emergent, any urban center. No landlord would allow you to bring a gas vehicle inside the house. That's just not going to happen. But a bike like this can do wonders in places like Africa, where you have very little, where a car costs a lot of money, but a bike like this can go a far distance, um, and it requires very little maintenance. Right, a motorcycle of equal caliber and equal output would actually require a lot more maintenance, such as oil changes and uh, the necessity to find gas and clutch clutch engagement and things of that nature, transmission issues. The only qualm I can see is that you would need a charge outlet to be available, and unfortunately, in a lot of places in third world and second world countries, electricity is scarce, so you can't always have access to a fast charge. Right, in 2 hours, it takes 2 hours to get 80% out of the bike. Just as an FYI, you Complex Design actually sells um, electric bikes as well. So definitely check out Complex Design. Um, Go to Business Wealth and Power, and you can probably see some of his advertisements of bikes he sells at electric base. All right, let me get to the next article. Solar chargers might be fine, Joe Black, but um, your wattage is really dependent upon the size of the panel itself. Most solar panels that are about 3 feet in width, or in size, um, only going to give you about maybe 15 to 20 watts of power, maybe 25 at best. All right, let me get to this next article on the docket. This next one is from nature.com. Build science in Africa. To cope with climate change and population growth, the continent urgently needs more homegrown researchers, argue Anagar Atikum, Nils uh, Stingeth, and colleagues. So, all right, so Africa's population is projected to nearly quadruple over the next century, and that is following a staggering increase of over just 7 decades, from 200 million people in 1950 to 1.25 billion in 2018. Meanwhile, temperatures across the continent uh, are expected to rise by between 3 degrees Celsius and 4 degrees Celsius over the next century, bringing more drought, flooding, conflict, and species loss. To face those formidable challenges, Africa must improve its capabilities in higher education and research. Yet, the quality of scientific education provided at many universities on the continent has, if anything, deteriorated over the past 2 decades. When two of us, AA and AM, moved from Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia to begin our PhDs in ecology and population genetics at the University of Oslo in Norway in 2007 2012, we had never set foot in a genetics laboratory before, nor even seen a PCR machine. We had taken courses in statistics while pursuing master's degrees in Ethiopia, but had never touched a computer as part of our training. Thus, we had no practical experience in complex data analysis and no idea about how to use software programs, such as statistical packages R or ArcGIS, that are now common tools in undergraduate courses in ecology, genetics, and conservation biology in high income countries. Expand that. Between us, we have experience in conducting research or mentoring researchers across sub-Saharan Africa, Botswana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, Tanzania, and Uganda, and in other parts of the world, including China, Canada, Germany, Norway, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Four of us were born in Africa and trained there as well as in Europe and Canada. The rest of us are from high income countries. Drawing on this experience, we lay out the challenges of getting training in biological and environmental sciences as an African student at home and abroad. In our view, the improvements so badly needed must happen mainly in Africa's higher education system of public and private universities, but support from the international scientific community is essential. Global research and global stability stand to benefit. During the last quarter of the 20th century, national governments and the World Bank prioritized primary education over higher education. From 1980 to 1996, for instance, of the total budget for education in sub Saharan Africa, 49% went to primary education and only 18% to higher education. In the early 2000s, governments and international agencies changed course, recognizing that the global economy of the 21st century would be driven by knowledge. A flurry of expansion in the higher education across Africa followed. In Ethiopia, for instance, between 2003 and 2012, the share of government expenditure on education was stable for primary education at 35%. For higher education, it increased from 28% to 43%. The number of public and private universities has soared. Ethiopia, for example, now has 46. Before 2000, it had two. And between 2000 and 2013, total enrollment in higher education on the continent doubled to 12.2 million. Yet most of Africa's universities lack well-equipped laboratories, libraries, and other basic infrastructure such as reliable electricity supply or internet connection. There is little funding for research, see scant spending, at Addis Ababa University, which ranks 37th among the best African universities in 2018 UniRank scale. Each PhD student receives about $16,000 US in total for 4 years of studying, even accounting for the differences in the cost of living. That's about 60% less than a typical PhD student receives in Europe or the United States. Faculty members are typically poorly paid and insufficiently trained, and many focus on almost exclusively on lecturing because it is almost impossible to provide students with hands-on research experience. What's more, students have little access to scientific publications other than those that are freely available online. Explain this out. So sub-Saharan Africa doesn't even measure when it comes to East Asia and North America and Western Europe in terms of GDP spending. To make matters worse, most of the faculty members who advise graduate students have little teaching, research, or advisory experience themselves. In Ethiopia in 2010, less than 20% of the university instructors held master's degrees, and less than 4% held PhDs. Even in South Africa, the country with the highest total spending on research and development, only 39% of academic staff hold PhDs. The lack of training becomes a vicious cycle. Graduate students from many universities produce these that fall short on international standards and rarely publish their work in high impact journals. As university enrollment in Africa continues to mushroom, its historically underfunded higher education systems are being stretched to breaking point. Across the continent, academics now teach more classes containing greater numbers of students than ever, leaving little time for research. Poorly paid faculty members often have second jobs at other universities in the private sector or with non governmental agencies, which compounds the problem. In Nigeria, for example, it is not uncommon for an academic at one university to lecture at several others. Some courses are crammed into a couple of 12-hour days to enable lecturers to get to their next teaching post. So these are the trends in higher education. Graduation from African universities is soaring, but more students per teacher and decreased spending per student mean the quality of education is likely to fall. Despite these formidable obstacles, it is an exciting time for higher education and scientific research in Africa. Decades of investment in primary and secondary education have created more candidates for further education, and the growing number of people with internet access is making collaboration much easier, both in Africa and with the rest of the world. Overseas support. Currently, overseas support for African scientists come mainly from national and multinational agencies such as the World Bank, from European countries such as France, Germany, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom, and from individual institutions and research mentors. Since 2014, the World Bank has provided $500 million dollars to build or strengthen 46 African higher education centers of excellence for postgraduate education and applied research. So far, nearly half of these have attained international accreditation. In West and Central African countries alone, 8,000 masters and 2,000 PhD students have received training at these centers so far. This and other donor led initiatives by the European Union and the United Nations are too fleeting. Funding often lasts for only 5 years or so, but needs to be provided over decades. Current trends to shrink long-term foreign aid and are therefore worrying. In March, U.S. President Donald Trump proposed a 23% cut in diplomatic and aid programs of that type that would be needed to support intellectual growth in Africa. When it comes to nations supporting science in Africa, there is considerable variability in approach. Among high Among high income host countries, France had the most students from Africa in 2016, around 95,000, nearly 50% in master's courses and 8% in PhD programs. And China is the fastest growing destination for African students, according to the Chinese ministry figures. It hosted around 62,000 in 2016, up from fewer than 2,000 in 2003. Since 1961, Sweden has provided long-term funding and mentoring to research groups at the universities in low-income countries, mainly in Africa, in physics, chemistry, and mathematics. Likewise, Norway has offered various scientific training programs since 1970, most notable in the Norwegian Partnership Program for Global Academic Cooperation, which from late 2017 replaced the Norwegian quota scholarship scheme. In 2018, NOPART awarded $650,000 to three of us, NCSS or NCS, AB, and AA, to establish a mutually beneficial educational exchange program between the University of Oslo and Addis Ababa University. This will promote the exchange of ideas between faculty members at each institution and provide training to 26 Ethiopian and 15 Norwegian MSc students over the next 5 years. Indeed, a crucial lesson from the Scandinavian experience is the importance of sustained investment over many decades for promoting self-sustaining, high quality education and research in Africa. Institutions in wealthier countries can also have important roles in growing scientific capacity in Africa, but too few regularly regularly commit financial resources to this or encourage their faculty members to get involved. And between country connections generally rely on existing ties between individuals. These can be fragile and subject to the conditions of the granting agencies. University staff in Africa who have no contacts at a university in Norway cannot apply for NORPART funding, for example. To be fair, mentoring students who are far from their home countries is demanding, as well as often lacking experience in lab work, techniques in data analysis, writing research papers, and so on. The students face cultural and language barriers. Most assistance programs cover only an individual's costs, nor not those of dependents. But many African graduate students are older than most of their classmates from higher income countries and have families to support. Students can opt to leave their families at home, but this brings its own challenges. Incentivize faculty members in high income countries, in our view, establishes more one on one mentorships for students with advisors from wealthier countries would mostly rapidly increase the rate at which science develops in Africa. Existing Reward structures in academia favor individuals who win big grants and publish in those most prestigious journals. We think that such reward structures should adopt to meet the changing realities of a global society. Scientists who invest in international collaborations with African scientists and others from low income countries could be given additional grants specifically for intensive um, um, mentoring, for instance. Imagine how the rate of scientific development in Africa would change if every paper published by an African graduate student mentored by a researcher from a high income country counted twice as much for tenure and promotion as a paper by a graduate student from the advisor's own university. Support MSc and PhD students. Institutions in higher income countries that support graduates from Africa should offer modified programs designed to meet their needs. These could include peer mentoring programs and budgeting for students to do any extra year or more courses to enable degree completion. Support scientists in Africa. Universities across Africa need to attract and retain more qualified educators by improving working conditions. This would support all African or all academic researchers, but especially those early in their careers. It is relatively easy to obtain a faculty job in many African countries because of the increase in the number of universities, but pay for academic scientists is typically abysmal. For instance, the gross monthly salary for a new PhD holder, oh, excuse me for 1 second. All right, let me start over again. But pay for academic scientists is typically abysmal. For instance, the gross monthly salary for a new PhD holder at Addis Ababa University is less than $500, around the same as the monthly rent for a typical two-bedroom apartment nearby. Also, the limited faculties and support for research in sub-Saharan Africa is dis, uh, dismaying for newly minted African PhDs. Many African PhD holders returning from home after a stint abroad find it difficult or impossible to remain competitive in their field or to support a family on the salary provided. Instead, they opt for more lucrative work in the private sector or international development. Others never return, contributing to Africa's brain drain. Sounds like the manosphere. To encourage African PhDs to stay in science in Africa, foundations and other granting bodies worldwide should offer more multi year research grants that support both basic and applied research on the continent. Funding schemes similar to those in China and some European countries should be developed to incentivize African students trained in high income countries to contribute to scientific development in their country of origin. That's actually a great idea. Developing science in Africa will improve global political and economic stability, and research as a whole will be strengthened by different ideas born of different challenges and experiences. If many more African scientists become key members of the global scientific community, ultimately, it must be Africans themselves who drive the transition towards a stronger Africa. Wealthy African entrepreneurs could help with this. Governments across the continent must bring their own money to higher education and research, but improving Africa's higher education and research capacity will will also require considerable spending by and structural change. Structural change in the academic and financial institutions of richer nations. Most importantly, scientists scientists working in high income countries or emerging economies need to change the way they value, and reward collaborations involving research is from Africa. It is only by working together that sustainable top-level African universities will develop institutions that are needed if we are to tackle the major global issues of our time. So, this is probably one of the most interesting things I've read all year on Africa, on the continent itself. I didn't know that they were having these sort of issues initially. I knew they had infrastructure issues, but I didn't know that it was this bad. I think one of the failures that black people, ADOS, do in America, especially when it comes to the HBCUs, I've talked about this several times before, and Dr. Phoenix has agreed with me. I think our big bro from the Rotten Apple, the Golden 11, has agreed with me on this, that HBCUs should have expanded into Africa. They should have extended their partnerships in Africa to maintain the value, the enrichment of the HBCUs.
For sure, a huge opportunity that was missed. Big. Dr. Gerald Horn and a few others have sat down and have kind of somewhat commented on this a bit. Absolutely. Big issue. The HBCUs were in, I think, some respects short-sighted. They were thinking that they were having economic problems, but they could have shored some of that up by doing that as well. Hey, I definitely think Howard University, without question, Fisk, and and Hampton U and so forth. Those HSBCUs, without question, do have some of the financial wherewithal to have made some of those moves.
Morehouse.
Morehouse College, absolutely. I know Lincoln University and Allen University and some of those other smaller ones could have had difficulties, and just in student enrollments as well. But education is a competitive thing, and people definitely want to go to the more competitive schools. But I think even a partnership deal could have been done with the bigger schools to kind of have worked with the smaller ones as well and expanded in Africa. They weren't thinking that way. I believe that is huge. There's a huge economic benefit to it, because you educate really good students. They come over here and they work. They go over there, they work. There's you enhance each other, and having better educations, and then you have these professionals coming here to work, or even going to other areas to work. That enhances the whole overall. That enhances the diaspora. Let's be frank about that. It really does. So, I think they were somewhat short-sighted in that. Somewhat short-sighted. I'm talking about the ones who had the wherewithal.
Yeah, they should have done that. Yeah, they should have done that under the Obama administration. I'm not sure who was in charge of that, who was in charge of higher education, and like Betsy DeVos is under Trump back then under Obama. I don't know who was in charge of that, but that should have been a foreign policy initiative to strengthen and bolster up the relationship between ADOS and those on the continent. That would have been groundbreaking, because what they're seeing in the article is that the time to maturation is actually pretty. It's actually a pretty short round trip, so to speak. So you set up shop of your HBCUs over into these sub-Saharan African countries, and then the amount of student enrollment that's going to come out of that is going to contribute to the everlasting sustainability of your institutions there, as well as some of these private companies, these private corporations, and private investors such as Bob from BET. What's his last name?
Bob, Johnson.
Yeah, Bob Johnson. Thank you, Bob Johnson. And many of these other athletes, man. I watched an interview with Akon, and he had brought dozens of rappers to Africa to make investments, which is something I hadn't even, it doesn't really get talked about much in the manosphere, much less the media. So I say all that to say that there were opportunities on the table the last 10 to 15 years that we just dropped the ball on.
Yeah. I mean, I think we stayed too parochial in our thinking. We stayed too too short-sighted. We've only looked here and said, well, this is the only issue. And you have people out here who have a lot of visibility who's saying the same thing. We don't need to be worried about over there. We worried about what's going on over here. And and I'm not going to mention any names, but you have
Mm-hmm.
people who have some sizable followings.
Mm-hmm.
And she would be up there saying, "No, we don't worry about them over there. We worry about we just take care of ourselves over here." And I own African American, and then here this person has at any given time 1,500 more or so or more in the chat saying this, and a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
are agreeing with it. I don't feel we should be leveling those kind of messages. I think we should be able to, okay, yes, we can say there's some Africans who definitely have issues with us. Yes, no question about it. But we got to think bigger. We got to think bigger than just beyond a few of those who over here who are skewed. We have to look at, the big picture, because that's what everybody else is doing. And why are we not playing this game? Doesn't make a lot of sense. Just doesn't. We have to get out of some of this, I would say, parochial thinking and take a broader view, because it's only gonna enhance us.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Dr. Phoenix, what's going on, brother?
Hey, what's going on? What's going on, Nagone?
Chilling,
Dr.
bro. What's
Phoenix,
going
what's up, baby? What's going
Nothing
on?
much. I know I've talked about this many times before on previous panels. I've been saying this since the very first panel I came in on, talking about funding, about NIH, for example, doing a lot of the funding, a lot of the research that's going on in Africa, and how they're taking some of the best and brightest minds out of Africa, and obviously they're bringing them over to the U.S. and training them. And this article hits home to many things that I've been talking about. I mean, again, they start off by talking about PCR. I mean, a lot of folks don't understand what PCR, and this goes exactly to the question that you posed, why Black people need to study science. PCR is called polymer chain reaction, and basically what it's a technique used in molecular biology, where you're able to make copies of specific segments of a DNA. You can make thousands of copies, and then from that you can turn those thousands of copies into millions of copies of a specific strand of a DNA sequence. And this is the very basis of molecular biology and studying genetics. I mean, this is one of the most very fundamental skill needed if you're gonna be in the area of molecular biology or genetics. And so again, this is one of these things that I've been talking about, because I have personally seen this when I went to nursing school, and even now as I head to medical school and all this stuff. I've This is such an issue that we dropped the ball on, where those of us, this is an area of opportunity that we have certainly dropped the ball on, as ADOS, whatever you want to call us. Where
Yeah.
I was just the brother Nagon was talking about more. I was at Morehouse last summer, touring the medical school and talking with some of the folks there. And what I saw when I went to Morehouse? About a third of the population, the medical students there, were white.
White and Indian.
Yeah.
And Indian. And
I mean, you could have
advantage.
you couldn't even pick a brother out of the damn group.
And our schools are messing up. I mean, it's part of our baseline education. Like you were just talking about the CPR thing, and dealing with recombinant DNA technology and using reverse transcriptase is one of the major enzymatic, tools that they use to copy DNA, or using other enzymes to cut and clip and paste and so forth. This is fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. I mean, that's going to cure diseases and a lot of other things, and we're just, and the many other types of technologies that branch out literally into the industrial world, and we are just, we should be on this kind of thing, and we're not on this, man. We're not on at the level we need to be, and this stuff is not It's not to say it's not that hard, because science is more tech. It's definitely a little tougher as far as study is concerned. I remember taking organic chemistry. That was 23 hours a week. To get that right. Regular chemistry was that way. Physics, 23 hours a week. You had to put into, if you want to get a decent grade in that class. So you have to study. You have to put your time in. But discipline, you can get it. This shit is not beyond your capabilities, and we just have to push people into it. Our kids are smart enough, more than smart enough to learn this stuff. Our kids are brilliant. I got my grandson. He's a brilliant kid. I got to give it to him, but he's picking up some advanced techniques in mathematics. I've just been showing him that because he puts together like a puzzle. Our kids are smart. We can do this stuff. We just need to just really expose them, and that's our biggest issue. Boy, we're having a difficult time doing that.
One of the things, as a tech person myself who works in IT, man, open source has been fundamental in growing a lot of companies' bottom line for infrastructure as well as software development. You can go to GitHub, you can go to opensource.org or opensource.com, I think. There are many tools and applications available on the open source market for this very reason that the article pointed out, that the students don't have access to lab work. Well, guess what? This is the perfect opportunity for ADOS people to actually get inside of an academic setting and create these open source tools and applications for people on the continent to take advantage of. Because it's free, it doesn't cost you anything.
I mean, again, like I said before, from the very first panel you invited me on, Mike, I've been talking about this. Again, we're talking about enzymatic reactions. We're talking about PCR. All this stuff scales up, and so we get to what brothers know it as CRISPR and stuff like that. The technology that literally allows geneticists, molecular biologists to go in and activate and deactivate genes at will. This is where we're at now. We got designer babies on the well, I ain't gonna say even on the horizon, because there's been, and I'm sure you brothers are familiar with that story that came out. I think it was earlier this year about the scientists in China that created those babies, and there was using it, and they were resistant to HIV, and he was being brought up on like ethics and all this other stuff. But again, I these are things that are so important, because again, we don't understand as a people how studying science, how these things apply in real life. For example, for us, for Black people, we know that for example, those of us with ancestry, sub-Saharan ancestry, we know for a fact that sickle cell is a big problem. Is a major problem, especially if you go over to Africa, especially those that are in West African countries, Ghana, Nigeria, and stuff like that. Here in my state, we do mandatory testing for Black babies that are born, just to test them, to make sure, do genetic testing to make sure that they have that they're not positive for sickle cell. So I mean, these are just some of the more practical ways that you take all this high level stuff and you apply it in real life, and then it becomes useful to us. And one of the things that we fail to understand, and what continuously gets looked over, and I'll use myself as an example. One of my mentors, an Indian guy, he's a physiologist. I started doing basic science research with him, where I got certified on working with animal models. So I was working with mice, and specifically I was doing I was inducing diabetes and diabetic wounds into mice, and I think I talked about this before. But
this is again, laboratory, right?
Yeah, but one of the things that I did was one of the things that I also had to do is that I also had to learn about anesthetizing these mice, because we had to use anesthesia to put them under whenever we would give them diabetic wounds and stuff like that. So you see these practical applications, understanding how gas diffuses in the blood. There's very practical applications of, one, how a pressure cooker works. Most folks understand, I'm sure you brothers understand the equation, the PV equals nRT. I mean, this explains how a pressure cooker works. Most
Mm-hmm.
most folks don't even understand that, you got things like the Haber-Bosch process, which is high altitude ammonia formation. This is stuff you learn in basic chemistry.
And it's a shame that African governments don't haven't done more to address this issue for lack of access to resources. Um, there's so many ways that we can actually go about this. It's a shame that the lecturers and adjunct professors are only getting paid what somebody at Walmart makes in a single week. They get paid in a month. That's a tragedy in itself.
I mean, the process of getting involved in research, and I'm telling you that as a person who's been on NIH funded research projects. I've been on projects funded through the NIH, through the National Cancer Institute, through the American Heart and American Diabetes Association, and I'm telling you, I mean, these things are, one, they're very difficult to get into because typically you have to know people. This is an insider game. You don't get access to these kinds of the funding. One, you have to at the very least demonstrate a minimum level of competency to even come under the radar of any of these mentors. I mean, for example, the gentleman I was just talking about, the physiologist I work with, he approached my original mentor when I was in nursing school to work with. He asked me to come on and work with him because he saw my project. He saw this 60-page thesis I wrote as an undergrad on diabetes and diabetic retinopathy.
Hmm.
And to have this level of understanding about the pathophysiology of how this works, the genetics of how this works, the biochemistry, understanding all these various metabolic pathways, understanding that, for example, diabetic retinopathy, its pathology is very similar to cancer because of what it does. And a lot of folks don't even know that. But again, if we don't understand sort of just taking basic biology and understanding that all of these concepts are cumulative and they build on each other.
Hmm.
So you take biology one, then you take biology two, then you move over into biochemistry, you move over to genetics. I don't have a biology degree, but I can tell you right now, I've taken enough biology to get one.
Hmm. It's interesting that we're actually discussing this because the whole purpose of edx.org actually came out of what this article is discussing, to make the education freely available at the baccalaureate level and master's level. You can't get a PhD yet on EDX, but you can get master's degrees now starting this year. So in
Oh, that's
2019 they
interesting.
started launching. Yeah,
I,
you can get a
I
master's
mean,
degree at 1/5 of the value of a brick and mortar.
yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, and this is such the key thing, and this is, this kind of goes to a conversation that we've had before about mentors. And like I said before, there's an old saying that goes, when the student is ready, the mentor will appear. And so in order for that mentor to be available to you, you have to demonstrate minimum levels of competence. Whether you're a scientist, you study genetics, you're an engineer, you're a physician, you're a nurse, whatever the case, you have to demonstrate minimum levels
Hmm.
of competency. And
Hmm.
this is where we fell at because minimum level of competencies start when we're young. It's that critical period of development from 1 years old to about 5, 6 years of age, depending on
Hmm.
what you get. And that's where that foundation is put. When the brother Complex Design talked about Montessori schools and had his lovely daughter come on and she talked about how she learned, or the brother Paul Bryant talked about his young, excuse me, his daughter. You know, that's where it starts at.
Yeah, and shout out to Paul Bryant, man. Shout out to Paul Bryant.
And again, these things take. These are not. Again, I've said this before, said it many times. These aren't sexy degrees per se. They only become sexy once you get a PhD or something like that. You get to call yourself a doctor, whatever.
Hmm.
But getting to that process, you're slogging your way through it. You're gonna be up half the night studying the Krebs cycle, studying
Mm-hmm.
glycogenolysis or studying gluconeogenesis.
Yeah, you got to get on a Krebs cycle. At the end,
Yeah,
what do you have? Pyruvate comes at the is the byproduct
yeah,
at the end of the Krebs
yeah.
cycle. Yeah,
And then,
I remember all the stuff. Oh,
yeah,
that's just highly butterlate. But you're gonna have to sit down and really put your time in. Like I said, all this stuff. Orgo. Basic chemistry, physics. Microbiology, biochem. All that. You're gonna have to put a lot of hours in. You're gonna have to put hours in it. So you're gonna have to study. Like I said, 23 hours a week on each one of those classes will get you an A.
yeah. I,
Yeah,
If you put
I,
your time and effort in.
yeah, I was putting in for my undergrad, I was putting in at least, let me see, at least 6 to 8 hours in IT just to do
Yeah.
undergrad, and that's like, for me that was a lot.
man, I was taking 18 credit hours when I was an
Yeah.
undergrad, and minimum,
Oh yeah.
minimum, I was putting in 30 hours a week. Minimum. I
I'm
mean,
in
if you
some.
got a 4 credit hour class, you have to put in twice that amount of hours. I mean, excuse me, 5 times the amount of hours to
I'm
be
talking.
to consider learning the
I'm
material.
talking about organic chemistry, and I'm talking about with your lab.
Yeah,
All right, and you're going through all of the nomenclature.
yeah,
All right, and you're dealing with everything from your phenols to your sterones, everything. All
yeah,
right, and you're going through all that, and you're going through the stoichiometry, and you got to learn. You have to learn all of the various types of uh, you know various products that various
yeah. The reagents and the products and the reactions.
you have to learn all of that. If you're looking at a steroid, what are one thing you have to look at? To look at that
Yeah,
tetracycline ring that's there. All right, what coordinate positions would you put on on a on a steroid and make it an oracle? An oral? Where would the methyl group be located? You have to know this shit. All right, now me, I'm surgical with this bitch, Jack. But at the end of the day, I remember how to study. I remember how much study it took to get live with this, to get live, and it takes hours. And see, that's why you have to be dedicated to really get this stuff done. And you have to really push these kids, to get at this and really study this. Because once they do, and they get really butterlaid with it, they're going to take off in some critical areas. They're going to take off, and a lot of these kids are very smart. Our kids are smart. They have to be exposed and pushed with this. And that's what we don't have. We have people running around getting fine arts degrees and talking all kind of bullshit, but we're not getting into the tech stuff. We're not getting into the STEM stuff. You have to learn your physics. You have to learn, your calculus. So that means you're going to have to be decent and have your basics in fundamental algebra. Get your algebraic functions down. Understand how that works, and then you can move on to the calculus, because that's really all it is. They got the derivative in there, changing the y over changing x, and then when you learn how to solve certain kind of problems, you got to know the product rule, the chain rule, the sum rule. You just learn these rules and you apply them to each problem, and you can get it. This is all putting together these puzzles. I know how this stuff is done. I know how it's done. I know how it's done. I did it. I have other people who are doing it, who have helped do this. We can push this easily,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something that we're just not doing in our school system. I know why we're not. I know why we have the problems and the issues in our school systems the way we do, and I certainly understand that people are being spun away from these areas. We have to overcome this. This is on us. This is really on us, because the enemies out here, the people that are against you, are murderous and powerful, and they don't want you on top of this stuff. It is what it is. I'm sorry to sound like this, but it just is what it is, and it's our job to push this.
I agree
And
with
it's
you.
It is
interesting.
what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting that Dr. Phoenix was working on mice in the lab. I know a few guys out in the street who had to work on some rats out there. Um,
Oh, there are a lot of rats out this
talking.
mother.
Oh yeah, talking to the police. But
That's
yeah,
funny.
let me get to this next
That's funny.
article.
That's funny. That's
Let
funny.
me get to this next article, man. This one's from the IEEE.org, man. Do advanced engineering degrees matter? Was getting that advanced degree worth it? Job search site Hired asked 1,800 technology professionals that question recently, and 48% who hold such a degree think they owe their current job or salary to their degree, with 21% not sure and 31% indicating that they could have had the same job and salary without it. That's a pretty mixed review of the benefits of advanced degrees. And going forward, the Hired survey found that 54% of the survey respondents were uninterested in contributing on to another credential. Why not? 45% of survey respondents said on the job experience is more valuable than additional schooling, and 24% said advanced education uh, just costs too much. Their lack of interest in advanced degrees may also be linked to the rising interest in software boot camps, according to a survey of 700 software developers hired conducted earlier this year. Some 76% of boot camp grads think the experience prepared them for their current engineering jobs, and 57% of the technical hiring managers would hire software developers educated through boot camps that survey found. So I've talked about this. We've talked about this many times over the last few weeks and last few months. As a matter of fact, since the inception of the Brain Trust itself, that boot camps are and will be the way to go going forward. We showed several brothers from different articles who have been members to the Black Brain Trust, whether they're subscribers or they're listeners. They have attended these boot camps. They have come out of dishwashing positions in kitchens and restaurants and gone from making minimum wage at $8 an hour up to 70 grand to 100 grand a year. We've shown the work before. Now, are we saying, or at least I'm not saying, for the record, that you should not go to school and get an advanced degree? What I am saying is that what the article was saying about boot camps and the mixed relationship and review of advanced degrees points to a lot of the talking points that we've had on these panel discussions in the past. So we're not that far off. In the article in survey, it's actually pointing in the same direction that we've been talking about for the last year.
I mean, you still speaking, brother? I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I'm done. Go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, going back to what Nagon was saying a few minutes ago about just
Mhm.
method groups. You know why method groups are so important in learning this and in organic chemistry? Because methylation of DNA is what causes degradation of DNA, which ultimately leads to DNA damage
Yep,
and the development of cancer, stuff
exactly,
like that.
exactly correct. Creates more free radicals. You know.
Exactly. And
Yep.
what are free radicals? These are
You know.
these are oxygen species that are unpaired that run around with unpaired electrons specifically. And
I
so they,
thought the Manifest had a lot of free radicals in there.
My.
I mean, you have these
Oh
reactive
shit.
oxygen species, and this is why antioxidants are so important. Like one of the most one what's considered the master antioxidant in the body, glutathione or vitamin C, vitamin D.
Yep. Yes,
This is why
sir.
these things are important. And to contrast that with what Mike was just saying, this is why in healthcare and biomedical and health sciences and stuff like why the barrier for entry is higher because you do have to have a solid foundation in these basic sciences. You do. There is no getting around that. None at all. Tech is very different. If you tech is very, tech is a little different in the sense where, yeah, you can, might not necessarily have to have a degree, but you can do you can do a boot camp or you can do a certification and you can get in, but then eventually, you're probably expected to get a degree. I would probably say that that's true, especially since
Mhm.
I'm hearing that in the tech world, they're kind of starting to get a little snobbish with the folks with degrees. You're starting to have requiring folks to get degrees nowadays, but.
Mhm.
But in the world of biomedical research, biology, molecular biology, healthcare, you know, the underlying the underlying key to this and being successful in in these programs is that you have to have a mastery of the fundamental sciences. Pick it: biology, chemistry, physics. The brother Nagon was just talking about algebra. Algebra pops up in everything. Everything.
Everything, algebraic functions,
I
and
mean, it doesn't matter if you're in finance. It doesn't matter. I mean, just some basic stuff. Folks understanding what is the finance equation. What is the basic equation for interest or compound interest? Logarithmic functions. If you study chemistry, you better learn logarithmic functions. Why? Because when you do pKa and acid calculations, and how much and when does an acid dissociate? That's all logarithmic functions.
Hmm.
Stoichiometry, algebraic functions, a lot of cross multiplying. So again, they're very, all these things are building blocks upon each other. And so again, the key here for us and the key here for Black folks and specifically ADOS is one, pushing this when they're very young, two, being disciplined, and especially with our boys, because again, this is, they tend to be the ones that suffer the most because of this. But teaching young boys how to be disciplined enough to sit down and study for hours on end. I mean, again, like I said before, if you have a 4 credit hour class, it is recommended you study a minimum of 20 hours a week. So if you're taking like
yeah,
three or four, if you're taking like 3-4 hour classes in a semester, you can do the math. That's how many hours you need to be studying a week. This is a
yeah.
full-time job.
Exactly, and you have to be smart. You don't want to take four, four 4 credit classes in a semester and all. You're just not gonna. You're gonna get burnt. You got to be smart about it. Plan it out because, like I said, 23 hours. I said each class. With my friends, he was going for his PA. He's
Actually, I
going.
wanted to ask you about that, brother, because I remember you talking about that last
He,
week. I did want to ask you about that, maybe offline or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. But I was helping him with his studies, and yeah, there's some issues, but I'll get into that. But you straight A averages. I was working with very close. We did all the chemistry. We did all the science classes. And I was working with him on it. Everything from anatomy straight through, and I couldn't believe how much I remembered. And then we started to really go over a lot of stuff, and a lot of hours. It took a lot of hours. So you take maybe 2 of those classes in the semester. That's 48 hours in the week, and then you have to look at how many hours in a week that and that's just 2 classes. So then you have to start looking at everything else. You don't overload yourself, because that's you're setting yourself up for failure. So if you want to do very well, you have to plan your stuff out right. That's why it takes, to get that degree and get it right. You get through, you get through your basic classes in your junior year, from your freshman year to your junior year, and then your senior year, you should, be in a position to take like your biochem and some of the other stuff, but you have to get through your core, and that takes a lot. And you have to have a what I would say, the ones who go into it who do the best are the ones who have a talent for this. Those who don't have a talent for it don't fuck with it. But
Yeah,
those who do have a penchant, who are good with figures, those who are good in problem solving, that's what they like to do. This is where you should go. And there are a lot of kids who are this way. They just are not encouraged to go there a lot of times. But that's where you have to go. Those who have propensity for this, who have a predilection towards this, should be going into this and should be guided into this. A lot of people are guided away, and they start taking these courses. They don't do well and anything else like that. Next thing you know, they take an exam and they show that, well, this guy's good at problem solving. This is where you need to be. The next thing you know, when they start getting into you know math problems or anything else like that, they start to do well. They start to do well because they start to break things down and become a lot more effective. Um, at that type of study, as opposed to studying business law or something else like this, that they have no interest in. So those who tend to do well in these classes have a penchant towards doing well towards it. If you don't do well in math, so forth, people who tend to be good linguists, can learn different languages and speak good other languages, tend to have good mathematical analytical skills as well. So, look at those things. You have to look at all these kind of factors that kind of you can put together to help guide people properly. Um, But to get into the sciences, you have to have somewhat of a I think a little bit. You have to show some talent there.
Yeah, yeah, you need a bit of aptitude, and the
Yeah, yeah,
reason why, just to add this quick point in, you brought up organic chemistry.
yeah.
Organic chemistry is infamously known as the med school dream killer.
Is it what?
Why? Because it's one of the most difficult undergraduate courses you will ever take.
I
It
thought basic.
lots of people fail organic chemistry,
I,
black, white,
pe-
otherwise.
people
They
don't.
fail it.
People didn't study organic chemistry because I did flashcards and things like that, so that really helped me get through it. I thought the real basic chemistry was difficult, especially with respect to really getting into that whole into the orbitals, the
Yeah, yeah, the
orbitals, the
orbitals
orbitals,
are
and the
hard to
p,
memorize.
and you have to understand, and where they're active at and all that. I thought a lot of that was had difficulty. There was a lot of math was involved in that, and you had to really think through a lot. I thought basic chemistry was tough, but if you really studied and and got through it, you could you could do well. Orgo, in my view, was really very heavily involved. A lot of nomenclature, a lot of memorization,
Yeah, it is.
a lot of memorization of a lot of different structures, and just knowing them and being able to write them out and being able to really understand where various coordinate positions and where things
Yeah,
linked up to and so forth. You had to be on top of that. So I thought Orgo was, you had to have a way of simplifying it and writing down all the major organic groups and memorizing them, putting them to memory, and putting them on flashcards and being able to look at it. That was a great help. That was great. You had to organize. You had to organize it properly. People who tried to come in there and didn't study and didn't organize this shit right got vamped, and that was the big problem with them. They just didn't know how to. They didn't know how to organize it. But that's what you had to do with organic chemistry. I could take it. I could take a course on that now and certainly wax that ass. Even now, I'm an old man, but I would do well in it because I would know how to just organize that class. Organize the class, organize the work, and that's the key. Flashcards very important. A lot of people knowing all of those different structures. You know, the ketones, phenones. I mean, just everything. I mean, we can get. I don't want to get all technical here because people may not have that background, but really, getting into it is was extensive. You had to really lay your shit out. It was
yeah. I
Oracle
think
was no joke.
I think one of the important things to know about organic chemistry, you study something called enantiomers, stereoisomers,
Yeah,
and why are these important in real life? Because if you understand how the pharmaceutical industry can keep patents virtually forever on particular medications, study stereoisomers, and you will know why. If I
and
switch around a couple of functional groups on this molecule, it will still have the same effect, but it's considered a completely different
uh,
molecule, and I can renew the patent on it.
technically excellent point you bring it up, and that's why the pharmaceutical houses control your medical schools. All
Ex-
right, because they control the drug business and they control how treatments are done, and it's a giant cluster F if you know what I'm talking about. But you can see why
yeah,
certain industries control other industries. But yeah, you and me could sit down all night long and get live with this. But we'll table that for another time.
yeah,
Let me get to this
yeah,
next
but
article. This one is from, let me get to this next article. It's from Forbes.com. Why study science? The same reason you would study anything else. I can trace most of my career to one particular visiting speaker. This is unusual for me, as it turns out. Turning Point questions a staple of social media and author interviews. What made you decide to become a scientist and the like? I really don't have a good answer for that. I honestly don't recall a time when I didn't have didn't want to do some sort of science. What kind of science shifted a lot over the years, but I was definitely going into science of some sort. Ended up in cold atom experimental physics, though, can be traced very directly to one particular lecture in late 1991 or early 1992. I was a junior physics major at Williams College, and through some sort of prestigious visiting speaker program, the department brought in Claude Cohen Tana, uh, Tanuji from Ecole. No, I can't pronounce it in French. He was talking about uh, Sisyphus cooling, the explanation of which would win him a share of 1997 Nobel Peace Prize in physics about 6 years later, and it absolutely blew my mind. Sisyphus cooling is now a standard tool in the kit for people in the cold atom world. It is one of the entries in my series on cold atom tools back in the day. But time is time. It was still relatively recent in the very early days of transforming atomic physics. As a topic, Sisyphus cooling has all sorts of counterintuitive elements that made it appealing to junior year me, starting with the whole idea of making things cold by shining lasers on them. Then there's the fact that it's the solution to the puzzle of laser cooling working better than the simple theory predicted. Even as an undergrad, I knew that basically never happens. And of course, there's the benefits of classical education, name an allusion to the way of the various processes involved put the atoms in a situation of forever climbing hills in energy space only to find themselves put back in a bottom of a new hill. It's a beautiful and elegant bit of atomic physics, and Cohen Tanajudi is a marvelously clear speaker. Maybe the best I've ever seen at giving talks about highly technical subjects that are incredibly compelling while also being rigorously correct in everything. I was hooked right away, and when I learned that one of my professors had a couple of senior thesis students working on setting up a laser cooling experiment right there on campus, I I knew I wanted to be a part of that. I signed up for that as my senior thesis project targeted schools doing laser cooling research when I applied for grad school, and the rest is history. Extremely niche history, mine, but it's long in the past, so technically history. I'm not going to read this whole thing because um, I think the gist of it is here is you should actually just study science. Oh, Black Hole Strikes! You got to be kidding me, man. Um, what I'll say is this, because I wish I had that track back in the day for Nisby Junior PCI, which is pre-college initiative. I didn't have that access back then. But how I got into STEM myself was through a lot of just being around a lot of technology at the time when the computers were emerging. Whether it was the Commodore or the Tandy TR-86, I think it was, or TX-86 might have been that. Um, and getting handed down a lot of technology to begin with, a lot of computers and um, the Radio Shack electronic kits back in the day were fundamental in me getting into electronics and then computer electronics after that, and then playing with digital multimeters and oscilloscopes when I was driving RC cars for racing. You had to solder your own battery packs and things of that nature. You had to make sure that the voltage was right, or else your car wasn't going to work or your vehicle wasn't going to work. Um, and then I got into Windows 95, and then from Windows 95, the rest is history. I stuck with computers for the foreseeable future. Um, had I stuck with basketball, I probably would be in the NBA. I wasn't that good, but I was moving in that direction. Um, I'm glad I stuck with STEM, especially IT, because um, there's only so many slots in the NBA anyways, right? There's only 600 NBA slots, at least to date. There's probably about 250,000 IT jobs available right now in the United States. So I say all that to say this. I think there needs to be more mentorship done. I had quite a few mentors growing up. You know, seeing guys who work for Oracle, guys who work for Lucent Technologies, Cisco. Just watching those guys maneuver. They didn't even have to talk. Just watching them maneuver and play with switches and routers and uh, database servers and things like that actually engaged my curiosity. So that's how I got into where I am right now.
You remember the compact computers? Remember compact?
Oh yeah, I used to have a compact.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Well,
she's
I
a
got a
candy
handed
man.
down one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But, yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Yeah, I, I think now it's a little bit different than what it was maybe 10 to 15 years ago. But um, the culture, black culture needs a shift. It needs a it needs a coalition of men who just show up um, at events displaying themselves. Because it's one thing to see black women in tech and stuff like that. You know, I think I forget the woman's name who came from Google or Facebook, who was Obama's CTO for his campaign. Um, she's a very well known person in the tech industry. Um, it's one thing to see that, but when you're a black boy and you have to look for that sort of masculine energy and leadership, you're not really seeing that. And I think it's a disservice that they pair women up with boys, and then they're confused as to why they're not getting the results that they think they should. It's a gross miscalculation on the part of black people to sit here and say that we don't need male leadership in these areas, or we don't need to have any male expertise or male input. I think that's a disservice.
Oh yeah, that's an
People,
absolute fact. We see that male students do a lot better, especially if they're being mentored well by male mentors and teachers.
hmm
We know this for a fact. Like I said, Jeffrey Cannon and them over at over at Harlem's education zone. They've got this all figured out. We just have just too few people really who we don't have enough of that going on. And that's our issue. That's why I say so much of this is on us now. Not to say we can talk about white supremacy and all that, which is out there,
hmm
but right now it's really about us really working with ourselves, and we really have to push a lot of this. And our kids are smart, man. Well, our kids are very smart, very smart. They can understand very complex things at very young ages. It's just that we don't have the educational infrastructure
hmm
enterprise wide to really capture a lot of these kids and get them going. They are genius kids who are being lost every day.
We
Lost.
need we need we need more we need more super labs. And a super lab would be for us. A super lab is at least in the IT sector, a super lab would be an environment just completely engulfed in high performing computing. So a various amount of cluster computers and servers and so on and so forth, readily accessible for your needs. But once you put people in those environments and you just lock the door in there, they're forced to ask questions to engage whoever's going to be there, right? Okay, so how does this work? Um, what's involved? There's several questions that are going to be asked over a period of time in the time frame that they had it. I remember when I was doing undergrad, we got I forget which class this was, but basically they were trying to test our ability to think on our feet, and they gave us like I think this was like the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and people were seeing IEDs take out these Humvees. So they basically threw a picture of a Humvee on a projector, and said, how would you improve the Humvee? Had nothing to do with information technology at all. It was just how would you improve the Humvee from what it is right now? And there was like, I think you had maybe about 10 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes to think about that and come back with a conclusion. Um, and obviously you get a lot of different input, but the point of the matter here is you only have so much time to look at this. What's your initial impression, even if you know nothing about it? So the analysis of a Humvee at the time was was fairly new, for a civilian. Nobody actually knew what a Humvee was and things like that. I mean, I knew what a Humvee was, but the rest of the people had no idea what it was unless they had somebody connected with the military. There was just so many ways you had to look at this, and there was no right or wrong answer. But the idea was to engage your brain while you were on your feet, and to improve your ability to think on your feet in such a short, critical amount of time.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Hmm.
Totally agree.
Go ahead, Dr. Phoenix.
Oh, I'm sorry, brother. Yeah, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, again, this is very important because there was a couple. We know, for example, one of the major in-demand careers of the 21st century, and certainly, now and going forward for the far foreseeable future, is data scientists. And what are data scientists? Pretty much statisticians.
Hmm.
And why is statistics so important? Because anybody that's in the health sciences, or in any of the biological research, you spend a lot of time doing statistical analysis. You're doing scatter plots, Manhattan plots, box plots. You're doing regression analysis, which goes right back to what the brother Nagone 11 was saying a little while ago about understanding algebra. Regression analysis is basically slope-intercept equation,
Hmm.
and applying that to statistical analysis methods, uh, whether it's in healthcare, biological sciences, whatever the case may be. And so, one of the things that has to happen, and to answer the brother Black Uru Strike's question, how would I, if I were to garden a 3-year-old black boy, how would I structure his rearing? First of all, one of the first things I would do, given the kind of global environment he needs to learn at least 2 languages, period. So you get them at about 1 years old, get them into language classes. They can be proficient in 2 or 3 languages by the time they're 5, 6 years old.
And actually be able to speak them fairly accent free.
Yes, and they can
Like
speak it exactly with the proper accent, everything.
like they
Two,
like they like they were born there.
yeah. Two, get them involved with learning a musical instrument, particularly some classical instruments. Violin, cello, something like that. Piano, become a pianist.
Hmm.
That's one way. Another thing I saw.
I know a couple of guys in the manosphere who are PNs.
Mike, what do you say? Mike, you finished? Oh, Mike finished. Oh, Mike, you finished.
Yeah, yeah. So
Oh my God.
yeah. So one of the other things too, just do some of the basic stuff. There are apps out here. Brother Uru, Black Uru Strikes, brother. There are apps out here you can get on iPads, Android phones, whatever. Um, Basic stuff that teach children coding. Basic apps that teach coding. I mean, you got basic apps that teach kids just the basic structure of a cell of a DNA. I talked about this, a while back on a panel about how I went into a third grade. I spoke to a third grade group of students. This was at a white school, and these kids knew the basic structure of a cell and DNA.
Hmm.
Hell, they could teach some high schoolers.
Hmm.
So I mean, this just getting them to do that. There's tons of videos on YouTube because we know, unfortunately, most parents give a tablet to a child these days, and they just let them watch whatever on YouTube.
Yeah,
You
YouTube.
know,
Yeah,
they don't give them a tablet and say, okay, well, here's what you're gonna watch, and just watch, and monitor what they're watching. There's all kinds of videos teaching children about coding, about basic biology, basic chemistry, real basic stuff. I have a book. Here in my house, and it's basically 101 chemistry experiments you can do with your children,
yep.
and I can do this with any child. And this is just good for just making sure I'm refreshing my memory because I don't remember everything, obviously, but also just basic stuff, teaching them sort of the basics of chemistry. And to your next question, brother, physical chemistry is one of those. Physical chemistry, the whole point of physical chemistry is actually using physical properties to separate substances. That's
Yeah,
physical chemistry in a nutshell. But
mm,
that is a high level chemistry. We're talking junior, senior level. We're
yeah,
talking
yeah, yeah,
400, 500 level courses.
yeah. And
So I mean, typically to get to that point, brother, you got to go through general chemistry, organic chemistry, some other stuff.
yeah,
you,
because
you know, by the time you get to that level, it would be expected that you can do the stuff. And because one of the principal requirements to take physical chemistry is generally calculus 2 or 3.
it's calculus too, because they will be, a slight and not a lot, but they will be, every now and again they'll throw in, a derivative, and you will see sparingly an integral coming in
Yeah,
there a little bit sparingly, but that will be in there. And with physical chemistry, also, you have to have some fundamental basic knowledge of physics as well. So, there's some things that overlap. Physical chemistry is a very heavily math oriented
yeah, it's
course as
virtually
well.
all
Yeah, yeah, it's very heavily math oriented. I mean, physics is heavily math oriented as well. Um, but not that you have to have physics, you don't, but you will pick up certain physical physics issues there. But at the end of the day, physical chemistry is definitely very very heavy math, very heavy, very heavy. And like you said, there is the derivative will play a little bit of a role, and you will use a little bit of you will use the definite integral will come in on occasion
Hey,
sparingly, but it'll be
hey, let
go
me
ahead.
let me let me get you this next article. All right, this next one is from FastCompany.com. Celtic star Jalen Brown wants to fix American schools. When Jalen Brown has a few seconds to spare on the clock and had an open floor around him, he likes to go to the basket with a reverse dunk. He launches his 6'7" body off both feet at once, then pulls them together and tucks them underneath himself like a kid on a trampoline. His Celtics jersey stretches across his chest with his back already turned to the net. He locks his eyes on the rim over his shoulder before looking away and trusting his hands to do the rest. They flip back over his head, and with confidence of someone who was born to play basketball, Brown scores. He is nimble and powerful, a natural athlete, but that is just his day job. Last month, the storied MIT Media Lab named the 22-year-old professional basketball player as one of its 2019 director's fellows. The research lab boasts a robust community of luminaries, including founder Nicholas Negroponte or Negropont and architect Neri Oxman. Brown will be part of a special program that aims to bring new perspectives and ideas to the lab's work. Other newly named fellows include Michael Tubbs, the mayor of Stockton, California, and legendary skateboarder Rodney Mullen. At MIT, they'll attempt to fix the problems they see in the world using a method of research that its director Joy Ito calls antidisciplinary, meaning that each approach will be unique and multifaceted product of an array of interests. So, antidisciplinary is a description that could be just as easily applied to Brown. The small forward who just completed his third season with the Celtics is ready for a greater challenge, taking on the American education system. As part of his Media Lab fellowship, he will handpick a group of about 10 kids from Boston's disadvantaged communities and provide them with MIT resources. The goal is to build a scholastic bridge connecting from higher university to our low income community. Reconstructing our education system one step at a time, says Brown, who spoke exclusively with Fast Company about his fellowship. For Brown, one of the more obvious cracks in the system is standardized testing, which he thinks has a disproportionate influence over a person's ability to succeed. Rather than allowing his students' scores to dominate their futures, Brown will intervene and scope out each of their interests and aptitudes so that they can be fostered in a world class environment. From there, he'll collaborate with community centers and structures that are already in place to build a global learning network. Technology will be the key. He wants to see Boston kids talking with Compton kids and Compton kids talking with students in Indonesia. He wants a revolution. To get there, he's calling on others to buck their disciplinaries as well and collaborate with him at MIT. It doesn't matter what background they come from, he says. If they support education and they support our youth, I want to ask them to be part of the initiative, to extend their reach and help push this forward. I want to have a bunch of people making education cool. Sounds like a would be member of the Black Brain Trust. If anyone can make education cool, it's Brown. As a high school senior, he was pursued by a number of basketball powerhouses, but instead opted to attend Berkeley, where he took graduate level courses as a freshman. He seemed poised for a promising collegiate experience academically and athletically when the NBA named calling. When the NBA came calling, offering him the chance to earn millions, Brown, who also had a summer internship with Base Ventures, sees little difference between athletes who leave college to pursue professional careers and tech entrepreneurs who drop out to found companies. It is literally the same thing. It's just as hard. Getting to the NBA might be even harder, he says. And he isn't wrong. The NBA reports that the probability of going pro after the NCAA is 1.2%, and that's if you even make it to the Division One college ball. Meanwhile, a Harvard Business School study suggests that first-time entrepreneurs have an 18% chance at success. I think they are both impressive, and I've always had the ability to do both, says Brown, who signed a multi-million dollar contract with the Celtics in 2016. Brown knows what his critics are saying. Shut up and dribble. He's heard suggestions he and other athletes should focus on sports and not wade into politics, race relations, or education. But it's just 3 seasons into his pro career, Brown is already thinking about his future beyond the NBA. People look at me like, Jalen, you're in the NBA, you're an NBA player. What are you complaining about? But just because I escaped the barriers that society has put up, why should I forget about the people who didn't or won't? Brown says. I had to shoot over 1 million jump shots to be able to stand in front of you today. My goal is to provide that the journey can be a little bit smoother for the next kid, and I plan to bridge that gap. Round of applause for Jalen Brown. He is, if we had a fellowship, if the Black Brain Trust had a fellowship, he would definitely be one of the honorable members of it and a contributor. A lot of what he's saying is things that we've pointed out tonight and in previous hangouts over time. He pretty much hit the nail on the head. Um, we have to make education cool. We have to make the educated lame a disgusting word to even say. Um, there's also this many aspects of I agree with him on that bridging the gap from low income communities to higher education is a necessity. Dr. Phoenix has went talked about this at length and ad nauseum about the. I mean, he's from Chicago. He's seen it himself. I'm from Boston. I'm in the same area where Jalen Brown is. I've been to that laboratory and I've heard him speak and many other people speak there. The problem is structural racism in this aspect that he's referring to, and for whatever reason, the liberals don't seem to want to do anything about it. They always have this fanciful idea that we can just bridge the communities to these large multi-billion-dollar endowment universities and institutions, when in fact we should just bring the institution to the people in that community and change the environment. That's always been the position I have taken, and I think many people on the Black Brain Trust have talked about this ad nauseum as well, such as Black Gnostic Speaks. Um, for whatever reason, people are afraid to see black males in these higher spaces. You have you have a multi-million-dollar contract in basketball. What do you have to complain about? Like the article says, there's this sort of idea that says for black men to shut up, be happy with what you have, and get back in line.
Got to break out of that.
The audacity of you Negroes. The audacity of it.
Well, we just had a hangout yesterday.
The nerve
We
of
just
these
had a
niggas.
hangout yesterday. Yeah. We just had a hangout yesterday talking about, the intellectual black males are the new toxic masculinity. And people, some people were saying, where did you get that from? Well, guess what? That article is kind of pointing that out.
Facts. It's facts.
Go ahead.
Go
Go
ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
Phoenix. Go ahead.
No, I'll just go say. I'm sorry. Go ahead, brother.
No. Go ahead, Dr. Phoenix. Go ahead.
No, I just want to add something.
It's about to get lit.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something because what the brother Black Guru Strike, he brought up a good point about something else, and it just occurred to me. In healthcare, and I've talked about this on previous panels, and this one is really directed towards women. When you have a child, there's a lot of research that shows a strong correlation between breastfeeding and IQ. And the minimum a woman should be breastfeeding a child is at least a year. Many of the other groups of women, white women, Asian women, tend to breastfeed children. I've seen some numbers all the way up to 4 or 5 years old. But another way to help improve your child academically and increase their academic competitiveness is reading daily. Mother, father, I don't care who. Read to your child daily. It increases their working vocabulary. One of the major areas that black students tend to do badly on, especially on the ACT, and even on the GRE, and a lot of folks get tripped up on this on the MCAT as well, and the LSAT and all these other standardized exams, is vocabulary. And the GRE specifically, because the GRE specifically tests you on words that many folks have never even heard of. Reading is fundamental, kids. I have to say it. Can't say it any plainer than that.
Are we still up?
Yeah, I'm here, brother. I just wanted to add that point in because I was thinking about that as the brother Mike was reading that article, because again, these is one of the major areas where, just some of the small things we can do to help give our children the advantage that they will need to compete in this current environment.
Darn right. I mean, this is all fundamental. There used to be a program out there called RIF, Reading is Fundamental. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but that they were pushing that very heavily, and it was being pushed pretty much in our Head Start programs as well. And then those Head Start programs, of course, got cut back because they were a bit too effective, and kids were starting to do well, and funding is cut. So we have to look at that. But it's going to come down to really our community. This is going to have to be a real community thing, and people want to talk about the community, as they say, and folks want to jump out here and talk about, well, what you do for black people. Well, you folks start getting your kids educated. Start getting involved in that. and let's see if people are willing to put their time and put their time where their mouth is more than anything else than just their money. Um, this is where this challenge will be met. This is a very serious game. It's the biggest game in town we have. Biggest game in town. Education is the bottom line. It's not so much even poverty, because we know that the better educated a child is, regardless of their economic background, the better they'll do in the future. So they'll come out of poverty if they have an oasis in the desert, if you will. If you have a school that is, or an educational institution that could really help that person develop, that is more important than just somebody throwing some money at a situation, and thinking that a welfare program or anything else like that. It's not going to do it. It's your education. It's the education that's key.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't really know and don't understand, Harvard and MIT are the most powerful institutions in the state of Massachusetts. I mean, literally, they suck up all the human capital and resources and programs and funding, and they colonize environments. Basically break down barriers of sorry, not barriers, but blocks where people live. In low income areas, and they gentrify those places. So I'm not saying that MIT is a bad institution, but I want people to understand how powerful they are, how immense they are when you go into Cambridge. You just feel their presence there. Um, so my position earlier was that what they should be doing is bringing the institutions and the higher levels of education into those low income environments rather than to be sending them off to Harvard and MIT all the time. I think that's a disservice to the community itself.
Yeah, I think that's very true, brother. One of the important things to remember that generally in pretty much every state, your institutions of higher learning tend to be some of the most powerful, if not the most powerful institutions in those respective states. If they jump onto an initiative or create an initiative, generally governments, local and state governments will follow behind.
Let me get to this next article real quick. We only have so much time left. This is stupid. All right, this one is from CNN.com. South African space boy set to be first black African in space dies in crash. Uh, Mandla Maseko, the South African former DJ who won a chance to become the first black African in space, has died in a motorbike crash, his family said in a statement. Maseko, 30, beat 1 million other contenders to win a trip to space sponsored by the Axe Apollo Space Academy, which had yet to be scheduled by the time of his death. It hasn't really sunk in yet. I'm envious of myself, Maseko said at the time in a Guardian interview. I'm not trying to make this a space thing, a race thing, but us blacks grew up dreaming to a certain stage. You dream of being a policeman or a lawyer, but you knew you won't get as far as a pilot or an astronaut. Then I went to space camp and I thought I can actually be an astronaut. That's a picture of the brother right there. He went on to become a private pilot and also a corporal with the South African National Defense Force. Nseko was named one of the 23 winners of the contest worldwide in 2014, shortly after the death of South Africa's first black president, Nelson Mandela. He was an avid public speaker and community worker who inspired many African children to pursue careers in science, the family statement said. In 2016, he was honored by the Gauteng Department of Education in South Africa and had a science building at a school named after him, according to the statement. Details of his memorial service was memorial service and funeral will be announced later this week. So once again, you have another unsung hero, not being valued on these shores. In the manosphere, you get a lot of credit if you go to jail and you beat a homicide or a manslaughter or something like that. But over there, it's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, again, this comes down to what are our fundamental values, especially as brothers, as black men. Um, it, and this is something that I think is, there's it is only going to come from brothers. Period. It just will. There's no women involved with this or nothing like that. How a black male sees himself, excuse me, um, is a fundamental function of the environment he comes from. Is a fundamental function of his relationship to the men in his family, specifically his father. You know, so if a black male, we don't value this, the things that we don't value is ultimately a reflection of what black men don't value as a whole. So if we don't see that being industrious, being studious, being well learned is not important, but hey, dancing,
Hmm.
jigs, singing, clowning, buffooning. We see it in sectors of Black YouTube. We see it out in the world of entertainment. We see these athletes and rappers and all these reality stars. I mean, they especially the older ones. I really have to say this because a lot of these Gen Xers, they are out there showing their natural asses on all over for the world to see, just acting a damn fool. And again, what is the message that ultimately sends? And they getting a lot, they getting money. I mean, I wouldn't consider it lots of money, but they living a pretty nice life from doing it.
Living on borrowed time, though.
It is. I mean, it's all fleeting. I mean, again, these things are fleeting. Eventually, you know, the piper will be paid.
Yeah, yeah. Like somebody else said, our priorities and values are all mixed up. Um, they had a whole entire institution named after him. You get a rapper, you know, who gets a funeral service held in a stadium that he never even been in himself for a concert. So um, it shows you the value of how we look at masculinity. Um, this guy was supposed to be the first African in space, and then he dies prematurely due to an accident, and there's all types of big praise for him and what his contribution was, and what institutions and brick and mortar has been named after him. Whereas, you know, you can sell drugs for the next 20 years and not have anything to show for it, and you get all types of documentaries and books written, and celebrity guest signings, and these billboards in back of you with all these advertisements on it. It's hilarious, man. You can't make this
Actually,
stuff up.
yeah. I mean, this is crazy because again, I talked about me being a McNair scholar. You know, having this
Hmm.
fellowship as a McNair scholar. And here's the crazy thing: most black folks don't even know who Ronald E. McNair is. They don't even know this brother was a black physicist who died aboard the Challenger in 1986. Most black folks don't even know it. Most black folks, if you Google this brother if you search for this brother right now on YouTube, you can find his one of the commencement addresses he gave at his alma mater, South Carolina, where he specifically talked about the need for black people in STEM related fields
Hmm.
and the need for mentorship in these fields. And I talked about this briefly before because I have his autobiography that actually I met he has a brother. His brother's like an agricultural engineer. His brother's still alive, obviously. I met him about 3 years ago or so. But and his brother just talked about his, Ronald E. McNair struggle being a PhD student, studying particle physics. He failed his qualifying exam 3 times, but the brother never gave up. And that's what we need to teach to our children, specifically our boys, is not giving up. That is part of becoming a man. That is part of being a man, period. That's part of life. You're gonna have setbacks. You're gonna fail. That's just a part of life. But how you get back up is up to you. Or whether you get back up is up to you.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one's from Engadget.com. Russia launches X-ray telescope to find millions of black holes. A lot of black holes in the manosphere. Don't need a telescope for that.
Yeah, you killing me, brother.
Russia is back in business of space observation after losing control of a radio telescope at the start of 2019. The country has successfully launched Spectre RG, an X-ray telescope to co-develop with Germany's help. The vessel will take 100 days to reach its final destination of Lagrange Point 2, where it can conduct studies in stable conditions a million miles from Earth. When it gets there, it could significantly reshape human understanding of the universe. Spectre RG is expected to conduct an exceptionally detailed 6.5 year survey that could discover roughly 100,000 galaxy clusters, hundreds of thousands of active stars, about 3 million supermassive black holes. In addition to providing a more detailed map of the cosmos, it could help understand the formation of black holes, the distribution of matter in the universe, and the influences of dark energy on cosmic expansion. This is a milestone for Russian astronomy. While the telescope's final design varies significantly from the original concept and suffered multiple delays, it put Russia on the cutting edge of X-ray astronomy. While the existing X-ray telescopes have made major discoveries, they might not accomplish something on a similar scale for a while. Looks pretty amazing for a render, but the Russians have always been good at STEM, just not anything innovative, not innovative, but anything marketable for consumers. All right, that's actually it. We'll we'll open it up for open chat, for the next 10 minutes until 11 o'clock, and we'll shut it down after that.
You,
Again,
you, you,
go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, brother. Yeah, you know, the brother Black who was talking about, sending our children to institutions, and they're being bombarded with propaganda. The problem, and that they're sort of being programmed by these institutions, if you will. Again, yeah, that happens, brother. But that only happens when Black folks send their children to these institutions and they have no awareness, no sense of who they are, no sense of their history. And there is no institution that will ever teach a Black child that. Period. Even the HBCUs. Sorry to tell you that. There is no institution that will teach a child that. So that propaganda starts in the home. What did your parents teach you? What did mom and dad teach you? That's how you.
I
That's how
think
you do that. You send children to
I
these
think there's an opportunity.
institutions with empty minds, and they're just fertile grounds for these institutions to plant all kinds of seeds that will propagate into all manner of things. Black girls go there, they come out feminists and bed wenches. Black boys to go there, they come out the proverbial quote coon, if you will. I don't really like to use that term, and they quote chasing non-black women. The problem with that is that Again, if we're not teaching our children the fundamental
Mhm.
basics of who they are, where they're from, and where their power is at, that is, this is where we fail as a people. And then we're wondering why these black children go to these universities. They come out, they don't have one, they don't want, you know, they don't want nothing to do with the black society. We wonder why.
Right. No, I was just going to say that I think there's a perfect opportunity to actually create a homeschooling educational program for for not so much as Pan Africanism, but a historic reference as to um, from a homeschooling standpoint for Black people. Mostly because, like you said, no institution in this country is ever going to teach you that aspect of about who you are and where you came from. So I think there's an opportunity to actually create an open source platform like that, so that people could download this type of stuff to a tablet as an application on an iPad or some Android tablet, and actually run that program even on a smart TV. I would venture a guess that even a smart TV might be more viable solution because it's so broad in its aspect and it commands so much attention.
I completely agree. I mean, again, the brother Black Guru Strikes is talking about selling black students propaganda and political policies. Again, that comes from the home. That's organic. Your political and policy agenda, that's organic. That comes from your parents. That comes from the people. That doesn't come from an institution. That doesn't come from some damn academics teaching your children lies about history or not teaching them, or typically they do lies of omission. These are organic initiatives. A lack of a policy, a lack of a political agenda is the reflection of the greater black society. It's not the reflection of white folks, not the reflection of the Chinese, the Indians, you pick it. It's not the reflection of because everybody else has their agenda and their political policies. But what is ours? And the first time we've seen something, at least in my time on this planet, has been over the last year or so with the pushing of ADOSs. I got my issues with some of the players in it, but again, it's the first time we've ever seen something that looks similar to what we saw in the '60s,
Hmm.
where a real political and policy agenda that's forcing pol- pol- political that's forcing politicians to acknowledge that black folks have real grievances and that either you're going to address it or we're just going to sit this one out and all these other things. So again, these are homegrown, these are organic initiatives. They come from the community. They come from the people. And the community, and there's no community without a family. And what is the basic unit of a family? Father, mother, son, daughter, or two sons, two daughters, whatever. But that is the basic unit. It starts with the mother and the father. Period. Oh, good evening to
Hey, what's going on, Rainy Woman? How are you doing?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Your mic is breaking up a lot, Rainy Woman.
Hold on a second. Sorry. Okay, is this better? Can y'all hear me okay?
We can hear you now.
Okay, awesome sauce. Again, another good stream, and you all did a fabulous job with the presentation and the discussion. I to remind everyone that offering training education monthly on his Patreon for just $10, and that is with the stock market and also with currency. And also, Mael has Food with Money now, where he discusses Bitcoin and crypto
Your
to.
mic is breaking up a lot, Rainy Woman.
Oh my goodness. Let me try something else. Hold on a second. Hold on. Hold on.
Hmm.
Okay, can y'all hear me better?
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah,
you better.
yeah, you sounded better.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So I wanted to say that you all did another fine presentation, and this education on Patreon for only $10 a month. And also, I wanted to remind everyone about Lionel's channel on cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and investments. That channel is full with money. And also the Business, Wealth, and Power channel with complex design, and also Complex Designs channel CMPLX, where he discusses nature and just his daily life, like just his everyday life that he thinks that he minimizes, but it's actually pretty awesome. So I just wanted to remind everyone about those channels. Please subscribe, share, and support. Hit that like button, and that is all. Oh, no, 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 wait, one more. Nagone 11 is doing big things, big man things over on his channel. And that is all.
All right, thank you for that. Paul Bryant, what's going on, bro?
What's going on, Mike? What's going on, everyone here? You absolute legends.
What's going on, brother?
I'm
Just
good.
chilling, man.
I actually wanted to talk to the both of you, to Mike and Dr. Phoenix, but I'll wait until we go off air.
Yeah, I don't have any closing thoughts other than I'm still offering IT mentorship, just as a reminder to those who just join the chat and join the live stream. So if you want IT mentorship, please leave um, either your email address or just leave a comment in the chat and in the comment section underneath the live stream when it's finished, and I can actually get back to you. So if you're trying to get into IT, I can coach you in that area as well as get you from one IT position into another as a transition. So
Yeah, I don't think
coaching
I
in
have
both.
any. Yeah, sorry, brother. Yeah, I
Can I
don't think
pay? Can I pay for that mentorship with beta male coins?
This is absolutely free,
Oh, okay.
free, free of charge.
um I would say this much. I don't really have much to add to those arguments. I think I said everything that needed to be said. I mean, tonight just reinforced things that I've talked about in the past on previous panels, um, especially in the areas of research, biological research in Africa. I mean, I've talked about this numerous times. You know, and also, I currently have about three young brothers that I mentor. Um, I just actually I picked up the third one I picked up was actually a young brother that reached out to me that heard me on one of the panels here. He reached out to me a
Hmm.
couple weeks ago. Him and I talked a couple days ago, and so he's well on his way. And so I'll be helping this brother, tutoring him in pharmacology and stuff like that. So excuse me. So yeah. So I mean, I could probably take on one more because my time's kind of really limited these days. But if there's anyone that might be interested in the field of healthcare, nursing, especially, you know, just drop your email in a chat or something, and I'll get at you. Oh yeah, to the brother Rael, please drop your email in the chat because you talked about you wanted to talk to me about something. So if you can do that for me, that would be great.
Yeah, hit the like button if you have not already done so. If you're just now if you're just now listening to the stream for the first time, listen to this channel for the first time, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from us, including on the community tab where we do post things and we do big things on here. Game
Ah,
changer, what's going on, bro? All right, we are out.